Welcome, friend. I'm glad you're here. I would like to tell you the story of Pandemonium. My footsteps were light as breath across the soft marble floor, cautiously at first, and gaining speed with every passing pair of columns. A languid breeze rustled drapes as I passed them by, as if the wind itself was either pushing me along or spilling outwards from me. The hallway extends far into the distance, and the scale of this place I'm in eludes the grasp of my perception. I finally came to a large bench in the center of the hall, which is occupied by a strange and hulking figure. He appears to be rooted to it from the waist down, with his legs entangled into the carved stone and becoming indistinguishable from the heavy chaise. His upper half reclines backwards, surrendered to that stagnant fate, yet somehow still muscular and full of vitality. I carefully proceeded, avoiding eye contact, intent on passing him by. But out of the corner of his periphery, he caught me by the wrist, sending a shock down my spine, and with a solid pull he wrenched me over his chest. The smell of mountains pervaded him, and his flesh held on to the restrained heat of a rock in the sun on a cold day. His breathing was hollow and rhythmic beneath my ribcage, and he leaned forward to speak into my ear. "You have come to witness a derision. You must observe and decide for yourself the nature of this game. I give you these wings, that you may never fully fall, and you must view the world through other people's windows. Others will not see you. The veil is only thin on your side. Our way is heavy, solemn, and dark, but there is true love in it, and you will come to see me in all things. Go now, and watch closely." He pushed me off from him just as easily as I had been drawn down, and I knew better than to linger at his breast. An arch was all now that stood between me and the chamber, and I hovered lightly at that threshold to survey the scene. A round table held court to nearly a dozen figures at first glance, though a few seats were empty, and a feeling inside told me my prior compatriot was intentionally absent among them. The demeanors varied from frantic to bored, and murmurs pulsed around before the discussion was called to order. Upon that calling, it swiftly proceeded to fall right apart. A woman stormed in from another entry arch, one spoke farther than mine, walking with grace and severity before coming to the head of the table beside a saged man. She held the stump of her arm with the other, fury seething in her steely eyes. "He has wounded me. The hand with which I held the scales was taken from me with brutish force, and now the balance must be righted. His barbarous hordes grow thick and double over, suckling on the teat of his invirtue. He has abandoned all honor, and now seeks to appeal to his masses with ignorance and hate. The most base impulses in man find their solace in his indecency, and with every outburst his power swells. We are each to maintain our own stations and encourage man to pursue his highest good. Yet this one has allowed to regress to the states of animalistic savagery. Did we not tear down the very stars from heaven to prevent such a fall from grace? How dare you sit by and abide this, Father? My dear Venus, this injury is most grievous, but how can we attribute it to him? You of all should know the parameters of justice. What evidence do you present on behalf of this attack?" "I attained it where the silence speaks. That war of wills rages in the east, where freedom herself is gagged, and he seeks to have muted any one who would speak against his tyrannical ways. I donned my blindfold and descended to listen, and was confronted by him on that plain. His malicious laugh still rings in my ears alongside the sound of flesh and bone tearing from itself beneath his blade. The arm he severed was snatched and eaten, the scales stolen away for some nefarious purpose, I'm sure. But no matter how meticulously he polishes that sword, the stain of my abuse will tarnish it forever." Verily, his tunic had donned a crimson hue, and attempts to bleach it resulted in a peachy grade. This would be the colorway by which his people would come to be known, and the unifying aesthetic of the whole of the conflux. Rather than stand in defense of himself and his ways, Mars knowingly smiled, and proceeded to report. You covet my sword so longingly, dear, you have taken it. My way is that of piercing. You should know that best of all. A fire burned hot in her chest and rose up to her cheeks, pouring out as, I have chosen to sheathe it out of wisdom and grace, picking more well my battles, rather than stab out at anyone within reach, you impudent fool. The scathing insult just fueled his grin, and the surrounding gods became agitated as the influx of tension stirred the air. How quickly things had escalated from personal slight to character assassination. The provocations did not end there. Very well, steal my weapon. I will not rob you of your shield. You cannot brandish both of them while lacking your limb, and I relish the ultimatum that now faces you. Tell me, how will you act? Murmurs rippled through the room, like the slow push of a wake behind a crocodile. I will judge you, she responded coldly. Win this battle, and it will cost you the war. I have held you close all this while, against my better judgment. But know that truth reveals herself, and I will not hold back the crimes you have committed. Your betrayal of beauty and the kindness that was shown you will be known to all. Your failings, infidelities, and cowardice will be fair game, and by your own hand none shall ever love you again. That my regret will not be theirs. Alarmed, the Allfather interjected, No, this cannot be. Without love, humankind will perish. There will be no children, no joy. As if you have ever fostered an ounce of joy for your children, hypocrite, screamed out in protest a woman who had been seated on the other side of the table, who now rose to stand beside Venus. She positioned herself protectively by the amputation, as if to make up for what had been lost. Her absence left a void at the heart of the group, causing visible discomfort to those left to either side. Presented with this option to reconsider their position, but hesitating, with bated breath, for further development. It came forth with some trepidation. To his credit, he did not consume us as his father did. Ha! The joke fell flat. The speaker's eyes searched the room for some hint of mirth or lightness, but even those of his lover, who laughed at everything he said, did not shine in their usual way. They were filled instead with darkness from memory of that time which was never fully reconciled, and even the reparations paid during the expulsion of the beasts did not outweigh the crushing disappointment of their father's neglect towards them. No damage has been done which can't be healed. If we take a step back and stop wounding one another, it may be possible to recover as a family. Your optimism nauseates me, boy, an older man retorted. You have the memory of a goldfish. This feud has been raging since time began. What the hell makes you think that now of all times, and here of all places, will there be any more fitting of a battleground on which to lay down our arms and join hands as brethren? He rose to his feet as he spoke, walking quietly to the empty central seat, and took up residence there. The women, to either side of him, exchanged saddened glances, saying nothing to the rest of the group, but revealing everything to one another of their fear and their pain without a single word. Yet they did not move. A dark figure in the corner also made no comment, but in the quiet, their presence was finally noticeable to me, as I watched the scene play out from the archway. Jupiter's gaze swept over his progeny before coming to rest on his wife, eyes filled with regret and shame. So be it. If this is all my fault, then I will take the blame, and set myself wandering. I will renounce my throne, perturbed by the knowledge that it passes to my tyrant son, whose brutal ways mankind seems to adore. I will lament my misfortune, that my children do not respect me, they will bear me no grandchildren, and my wife does not love me any more. All that should bring a father's heart the most joy has been denied me, and I have no one else to blame. So I will bear this penance in the wasteland in search of what will bring men's souls and my own to peace. It was not enough to sacrifice animals or sons. What my heirs need of me now is to kill myself and be made anew. This Sky Father shall descend to the earth for what may be the remainder of our days if this wrongdoing is not brought to justice. Ha! God is dead. He has killed himself. What a twist, Mercury mused, unable to contain his mirth, much to the socially appropriate yet internally conflicted scowls of disapproval from his peers. I will test my luck in the wild, son. If I do not prevail, then the fates will be right to have their way with me. But if I should find this thing which the world seems so in need of, I shall be rightfully redeemed in your eyes, and I will take back my heavenly throne. Do you agree to the terms of this quest, Mars? By honor, I am bound to do so, Father. Honor! How dare you speak of honor, you savage cur! You slaughter throngs of innocents, but when challenged by a rival male, this facade of respect and chivalry comes oozing out like the testosterone from your pores. You disgust me. She turned and left through the far archway, an entourage in tow of the entire right side of the table. As he watched them file out, the father hung his head in shame and finally exited alone without bidding farewell to his sons. They hardly noticed him go, laughing among themselves and exchanging disparaging remarks about the opposing team. The Pantheon had been split. A sense of urgency came over me to report on what I had witnessed. I knew not to whom, but Saturn's comments about windows were ringing in my ears. I resolved to chase after Jupiter and put my wings to the test, inhaling sharply before darting out into the open, right past the lads. As promised, I was completely invisible to them, and passed by unnoticed, heart leaping from my chest as I did so. The corridor I tracked him down unfolded the same as the one I had come from, and I caught my way up to him before ducking behind a column. He turned to look behind him, nearly jumping me out of my skin, but I soon realized he was not able to detect me, but longingly looking back at his life he was leaving behind. Heavily he sighed and turned back to his exit. The threshold I followed him over melted away into a dark and heavy stillness. I had lingered there momentarily, surveying the vast room, which seemed to contain an entire world within itself. But the details withheld themselves, and would not reveal until I committed fully into that place. It was a one-way door, and as soon as I had stepped down and whirled to glance behind me, any connection to the place I had been previously was gone. There was only the way forward stretched out before me, a radial platform engraved like a compass rose, where the silhouette of Jupiter stood centered. A ring of colonnades separated what appeared to be blurry windows, but crowning them, where the frieze should be, instead rested the starry sky, stretching upward to heaven and on forever. This footprint of Atlas seemed to me the very heart of the world. I ran down to the platform and stood just behind Jupiter, who seemed to be evaluating his options, and as I turned my head to take in all that he was seeing, the view beyond the portals came into focus. Like spokes on a wheel, each pair of columns opened out onto a different biome, with each landscape knitting seamlessly into the next. Plains grew up from deserts, rivers gave way to the sea, and down from the mountains tumbled wastelands. Overwhelmed by the intensity of it and the massiveness of the scale, I'm not sure how long I stood lost there, in the world watching the volatile eruptions unravel the land and tempests shape the sky. The thing that finally snapped me back to the present was the quiet voice of my companion as he exhaled sadly. My Juno does not love me anymore. And he then began to recite this poem. In the voice of the shepherd, I beseech thee, O fates, scatter me as you will to the four winds. To every corner of the world shall I roam, in search of that which has been missing. I know not what it is, or from whence it hails, but if you would do me this kindness, steer me true. With the tone of the sailor I implore, let your winds crash around me, and do as they must. With all the violence due my infidelity, for me to finally be swept upon that far shore. Make me believe you, by whatever means. Strand me, conceive me, forsake me, redeem me. I accept all of these offerings. Whatever grace may be extended, with the call of the devotee, I welcome you, in all forms and all places. For the sake of our children, guide me true. And with that he stepped through the portal to rust-colored mesas, where lightning ripped through the sky in a flashy display. Without skipping a beat, he tilted his bearded face to one side and acknowledged, "I see you." His words startled me worse than the thunderclap that followed. And then he was gone. I stood there alone in the temple of elemental fury, eyes turning skyward to witness a reordered heaven, full of constellations never before seen by man. For a moment I thought I could see the starry palisades and ramparts of a cosmic fortress, radiating from the highest point in all of heaven, who whispered her name to be truth. There was peace in me now, such a stark contrast from the declarations of war, from what could have been either moments or ages ago. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this tale.